Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Yvonne Scott. I'm the head of the Department of History of Art. And sorry if I'm a bit croaky. I've been talking since 9 o'clock this morning to interested potential students over in the other hall. So thanks very much for taking the time to come here and to hear about the History of Art department. If you've any difficulty hearing me, stick up your hand and I'll try and raise it a bit. As I say, I've been talking since 9. First of all, to say welcome to all of you. I know this is a very busy day for you as you look at all the various different options that are open to you, but I hope that you'll find that history of art is a subject really well worth studying. And if you have any questions after this presentation, don't hesitate to get in touch with us because we'll be delighted to hear from you. What I want to do to start off with in this presentation is to talk about, first of all, to consider what the discipline of history of art is about, and some of you will be quite familiar with it if you've been studying your Leaving Cert or A-levels or from personal study. So you will have some knowledge of it, but for many of you, if you haven't done art history before, you don't need to worry because our courses are designed for those who are coming from a background where they've never studied art history but just have a general interest in visual things. So first of all, think what is the discipline of art history about, and then to look at what the academic programme in Trinity College offers. What is our course about? Well, to start off with, about what the discipline of art history is about. This may seem a very obvious thing to say, but it is visual. It's about looking. But it's not only about thinking about the appearances of things. It's not only about style and technique, because it also involves interpretation. It involves thinking about what you're looking at and reading the image, about making sense of what you're looking at. And while what you're looking at is very much about creativity, it's not only the creativity of others you're looking at, there's also the opportunity to be creative yourself in your own right. Because when you think about the topic, it's art history, so it's looking about the art of the past. You'd be pleased, I hope, to note that it's not just looking at of art that's from a very much earlier period. It also embraces the modern and the contemporary right up to what is being produced up to yesterday or this morning, because history occurs as soon as it's happened. And when we look at history, we are looking at history through the prism of our own time. We try to understand the past, to put ourselves in the place of the past, but nonetheless we're very much caught up with how we see it from the perspective that we have in the present day. And that means that history, the concept of history, changes constantly. And this is where you, as the new art historians of the future, we hope that your creative ideas will be brought into play with what you're looking at. So it can be very, very exciting from that point of view. So let's think next, what forms of art will we be looking at? Many of these will be fairly obvious. We'll be looking at architecture, painting and various kinds of painting, manuscripts, sculpture, prints, drawings, and also the technological media. In the last 100 years, we've seen the advent of a whole range of new media, and these are being used in all kinds of creative ways by artists who involve photography, video, film, and also alternative media, such as performance art and sound art. So all the traditional media, all of the ancient approaches to art, but also the contemporary ones as well, all aspects of visual culture. For each of these forms, we're going to look at the major artists and architects. Who are the great figures who have been so creative in the works that they've produced, the ideas that they have represented? We'll be looking at iconic works of art. So some of the most famous artworks ever produced will be analysed and explored and discussed. But we'll also be looking at lesser-known artists as well, and also, of course, a great many lesser-known artworks as well. So you get a great familiarity with the whole range of visual expression. And also looking at the key genres, themes, and issues. So it's not just about the artists and the artworks, it's also about what those artworks address. What do they mean? How do we read them? So exploring together major artists like Rembrandt, Van Rijn, and Claude Monet. Look at major architects, Michelangelo, Raphael, Bernini, and the various modernists. We'll be looking at Frank Lloyd Wright, Le Corbusier, so many of the modernist architects as well as the ancient ones. Look at iconic artworks like Picasso's Guernica, a major political work which responded to his horror and dismay and outrage at the bombing of a Spanish village in the 1930s. I suspect many of you will be very familiar with our very own Book of Kells, and it may interest you to know that as students you can go in and visit the Book of Kells as often as you like and without charge. So just nice extra bonus. And we don't only have the Book of Kells, we have an absolutely wonderful manuscripts collection that you can go and see there as well. We'll be looking at art from not only Ireland, but also from abroad, both traditional and contemporary. So visual culture embraces all kinds of representation. We'll be looking at the various themes, such as genre painting, paintings of everyday life, what people do from day to day. We'll be looking at landscape, from Peter Bruegel to Van Gogh and others, of course. Looking at portraiture, both modernist portraiture, such as this work by Frida Kahlo, a Mexican modernist painter, and German Renaissance Albrecht Dürer's both self-portraits as it happens. You get to know the various forms and symbolism involved in still life painting of all the various eras, and also the optics and philosophy involved in all forms of abstraction. You'll be looking at how materials have evolved over time, because that can be a very important aspect in determining what an artist can do or not be able to do. Certain kinds of materials will be available to them and other materials not available. So you'll be looking at manuscripts, for example, and the extraordinary, exquisite detail involved in illuminated manuscripts, who often, in fact, you find that artists so often defy the limits that their materials seem to impose on them. You'll be looking at stained glass, such as modernist work by Harry Clarke, an Irish artist, or maybe coming with us on the college trip to Paris to look at Sainte-Chapelle's stained glass. Or in Paris, also look at Monet's water lilies. In terms of painting, you'll be looking at sculpture, such as Michelangelo's David, or Henry Moore. Now, we have our own Henry Moore, actually, in the grounds of Trinity, and this is one that was on loan to Trinity during an exhibition that was organised within the college. And, of course, looking at contemporary new art forms as well, such as work by Nam June Paik, using neon lighting and television screens and sound. And, of course, architecture, whether it's looking at the great cathedrals of France, and you just see a shot there from one of our student trips. The students are utterly engrossed in what the lecturer is talking about in terms of this great cathedral, or architecture within our own campus, such as this Dean and Woodward building on the right, the museum building here in Trinity College. We'll be looking at Western art, but also at non-Western art and artifacts, because we have courses that take in a much broader global range. And of course, our resources within a stone's throw of Trinity include the Chester Beatty Library and their amazing art collections. We'll be thinking about the context within which art is produced. We'll be thinking about, these are the environments which give rise to art. So thinking about what is the background against which art is made. We'll be looking about the theories, the ideas that were current at the time, or that are current now, which is through which we look at art as the past. And we'll also be looking at the various kinds of disciplines that are relevant for us to understand art history. So the kinds of disciplines, now we're not going to be obviously going into extensive political courses as such, but to understand more in a more general way the politics, the economics, the religion, the social culture, the scientific discoveries, the geographic explorations that are happening at the various times, and how they impinge and influence what artists are doing. because it's very much about how artists reflect and relate to and refer to the society within which they find themselves. They're not all stuck up in attics painting away their genius. You know, they actually engage with the real world. And the artwork reflects this in all kinds of really exciting ways. They'd be looking then at the way they reflect the society in terms of the opportunities that existed at the time, the social conventions, the mores and the prejudices that existed at the time. Looking at issues that are reflected in art, such as ageism, sexism, racism, religious intolerance, and various kinds of persecution. All of these can find their way into the art that's represented. And we look at the various kinds of convictions, the religious, political, nationalist convictions, issues of identity, issues of education, literacy, propaganda, information, the media. So it's a very, very, very rich course to undertake in terms of the potential range. And what we find is that just to generalize really, that art can be categorized as either imagery that reflects and mirrors society. In other words, it can be very conforming, or it can challenge society. It can be used as an act of protest. So it'd be very interesting to see how that finds its way into the art that is produced. Of its nature, art history is interdisciplinary. In other words, it's a subject that relates so much to the world around it that any subject that you might decide to have an interest in or decide to study alongside art history is going to be an advantage. And as you know, art history is studied as a TSM course with another subject in Trinity. So we find that from an interdisciplinary point of view, language, literature, philosophy, psychology, cultural geography, history, there's a whole range of subjects that are relevant and are of interest in some way or other to art history. So what you'll be looking at is the various methodologies, the theory, iconography, iconology, and semiotics. In other words, look at the symbolism involved in the various elements of artwork. Look at the context that gives rise to this iconology, the symbolism, and look at the semiotics, in other words, the cultural meaning of things, what they mean. If an artwork is made as an altarpiece within a church, to understand its role in the liturgy. And to understand things such as, and so much of this you find that you can relate to instinctively, just in the same way as that when we see a Bentley car, we recognize that it's a symbol of status and wealth and privilege. So also we can look at artwork and read the image to see what do they reflect about the society within which the artwork is produced. So then to think about the academic program. So that's broadly what the discipline involves and can involve. So what about the academic program in Trinity itself? Well, as you know, it's a 4-year degree. Just keep an eye on my time. It's a 4-year degree. You study it as part of what's called TSM, two-subject moderatorship. And if you're studying art history, you can do it either as the art history degree as part of TSM or through what's called AMHC, which is ancient and medieval history and culture, which is a parallel degree which we contribute to. If you're doing TSM, you study art history and another subject for 3 years, and then in the final year, it's dedicated to your major subjects. So you choose which of those two. So for 3 years, they're studied equally. They each count for 50% of your results for the year. At the end of year 3, you are going to select which of those 2 subjects you want to specialize in for your final year. So you can leave it right until then to decide. And then what we have actually found ourselves is that the majority of students who opt for art history stay with art history. And that would be something like 80–90% stay with it. So we kind of feel that's testimony to the popularity of it and the extent to which people enjoy it. So what happens in each year? Well, the first year, which is the junior freshman year, or JF, it's an introductory year. So if you have not studied art history before, it's not a disadvantage. We assume that you haven't done it before, take it from scratch and bring you all the way through. If you have done it, of course, that may be an advantage as well, because it gives you a little bit of a head start, but you'll quickly catch up if you haven't done it. It's a survey year in the sense that it covers, it kind of maps out art history from early Christian times up to modern and contemporary. So you get a kind of an idea of the scope and the extent of art history, and then in the following years you take different periods in greater detail. You learn the terminology, you learn the language of art history. So if we use a word like chiaroscuro or impasto or surrealism, you know automatically what that means, and some of those will already be familiar to you. So you learn the language of it, and you also get an intimate and extensive knowledge of the imagery that you'll be looking at in more detail in further years. So it really lays down an important foundation. And then in the second, third, and fourth years, you have a range of modules, a range of short courses, shorter or smaller courses within art history relating to different periods and different geographic locations and themes. So you get a whole range of those, and each year you select a couple of these options. And these are all explored in the context of their own time. So just to give you some examples of the kinds of topics, there's art in the age of chivalry, for example, for those of you who love medieval art, modernism and postmodernism, painting and sculpture in Renaissance Italy, art in France from 1850 to 1900, which covers the era of Impressionism, architecture in the 19th and 20th centuries, the arts of Japan, approaches to art history and criticism, which is a more theoretical course. So you have a whole range of different ones here, and the ones I've asterisked being, from the earlier period, are also available to students of the AMHC, the Ancient Medieval History and Culture course. In the final year then, for the many who opt for art history, they have a dissertation which on a subject which they choose themselves. So this is a really interesting part of the course, because this is where you get an opportunity to choose your subject and study it in detail, and write about it in detail under the supervision of a member of staff. So you have a lot of control over that. You take a special subject as well, and you're given about 5 to choose from, and with these you meet in group seminars. It's small group teaching, and you get an opportunity to look in great detail at a particular era or period that you're particularly interested in. And then again you have the option courses, the more general lecture courses that were available to you in second and third year. So you choose further ones from them. Some of you would be interested in the option for studying abroad. Well, in your second year you can opt to apply to go to another university for either a year or part of a year. And we have a special arrangement with a number of universities within which we have this kind of exchange program, and this includes the Sorbonne in Paris, there's a university in Italy, and in Spain and elsewhere as well. So you'll be given all the details on that if you're interested in that. We also have a study tour abroad every year, and that most recently was in Paris. We've had trips to different parts of Italy, and so on. And this gives you an opportunity to see some of the major artworks at first hand. It's also a great opportunity as well for bonding with students and with staff, and of course there are lots of other opportunities to do that during the course of the fourth year. We do field trips also in different parts of Ireland, and of course very locally to the museums and galleries that surround the university. So how is it all assessed? This is the less popular part of the whole thing, but it's done through coursework. You have a whole series of essays and assignments that are done during the course of the year. There are tests and examinations, so there are slide tests. There's several of those during the year which test your visual response to works and recognition, and exams then, summer exams at the end of the year, and then, as I mentioned, the final year dissertation. And what are the advantages of studying art history in Trinity College? Well, one of the things is that it's a relatively small department. We limit the undergraduate intake through the CAO system to 40 per annum, and that means that we have a relatively small number of students each year, and that means that we can get to know them well and they get to know their classmates very well. The location is a major attraction because we're within a few minutes' walk of the major galleries, the National Museum, the National Gallery of Ireland, Chester Beatty Library, just up the road is the Hugh Lane Gallery, IMA is within easy reach as well. So it's, and of course you've the architecture not only of Trinity College itself, but the, within the city as well, and public sculptures everywhere. So tremendous, tremendous resources which are unmatched, and particularly so for anyone who's interested in Irish art, of course. The facilities and resources are excellent. The library in Trinity is one of the best, if not the best. Certainly probably the best in Ireland and one of the best in these islands. One of the reasons is that Trinity Library is a copyright library, so we get a free copy of every book published in Ireland and the UK. And that means the library budget then can be used to extend the purchases of non-Irish and British books. So really excellent facilities and resources. Of course, the manuscripts collection is wonderful. We have very, very good art collections within the university. We have also, in terms of the resources of the department, which I should just mention that you don't need to have studied art history before, which I think I mentioned. So if you're new to art history, we can look after you and bring you through. The resources of the department are very, very good. We have a dedicated reading room of our own, and that's something that not all departments have. So that means that there are book collections there, we can leave readings for you there, and it's a place where you can go, a quiet place to go and read and study, where you'll see your colleagues from the department and from your classes. We have our own seminar room as well, and we're just about to upgrade the computer collection there, so yeah, you'll have access to technology as you need it. We also have a research centre dedicated to Irish art history in the Provost House stables, and that's just an image of it there. It's a wonderful old building which belongs to the Provost House, which we got extensive funding for just a few years ago to have it renovated specifically for art history, for studying at postgraduate level. But there are very good reading resources there, and that will be available to students also. So I mentioned in terms of the location, and I think this is just something maybe to emphasize, is that the best resources for studying Irish art in the world, of course, are in close proximity. I mentioned the various galleries, and of course, within Ireland, we have trips to very important sites, such as Mellifont Abbey, to other medieval sites, and also to some of the great houses as well. So the resources for studying Irish art history are second to none. I mentioned the college collections. We have a collection of artwork by Jack Yates, a very, very good collection of art by him. We have the Douglas Hyde Gallery, you see in the upper left there, which is dedicated to contemporary art. And there's also the Science Gallery at the other end of the campus, and also a very good collection of sculpture, which is dotted around the campus. Contemporary artwork, you'll see all around the building. Oops, sorry, I don't know what's going on there. And yeah, this is a well-known piece by Robert Balla of people who do Jackson Pollock, and it'll interest you that a very well-known. I don't know what's happening here. Anyway, sorry about that. The system jumping ahead of me. But the point I was trying to make there is that we have very, very good collections of artwork that have been appreciated even by members of U2. And my last slide, which skipped on there for some reason, I'm not quite sure what happened there, but just onto my last image anyway, which I had wanted to show you, which is this painting here of a Velázquez portrait, which was recently discovered by a member of our staff in art history. And many of you, I think, are interested to know what career opportunities that there actually are for art historians. And what might interest you to know is that part of the reason that this was discovered was that a graduate of our department who was working in one of the major sale rooms in Britain saw this painting, had studied Spanish painting as a special subject with Peter Cherry, with Dr. Peter Cherry, and just had a little kind of feeling that maybe there was more to this painting. It had been believed to be by a lesser known artist, and contacted and suggested they contact our expert Peter, who went to look at the work, and when he examined it, he was able to say, no, it's not by the artist who thought it was by, this is a great painting, it's by Velázquez. So the kind of careers that are open to graduates of art history, there's work in the various sale rooms. We find many of our students go to sale rooms both in Ireland and abroad, where art and artifacts are sold. The museums and galleries all around Dublin and also in Britain and beyond are dotted with our staff. There's a whole area of tour guiding, and this includes taking groups of people on trips abroad. There's journalism and art criticism, so there's quite substantial work in that whole field of writing about, publishing about art. There's the whole curatorial field, of course. Their art centres have been springing up all around Ireland over the last 10 years, and many of our students have gone on to roles there. There's the whole area of teaching, and that includes postgraduate and the academic sphere as well. So quite a number of careers, but not only within the art and art history. What we found as well is that the kind of skills that you learn as an art historian are about exploring, examining, interpreting, and the kind of skills are transferable to a whole range of other areas as well. So we find that many of our students have gone on to careers in all kinds of fields, not only in art history. So thank you very much. Thanks for listening. I hope to be seeing many of you this time next year in the classes. Bye now.